Hi, everyone. This is the Drupal usability meeting for December 11th, 2018. And we at least have one topic for today to talk about media library designs. I don't know who wants to take it.
Well, I think that Sean and Christina are the ones who can talk through it in the most informed way, including me. I'll preface this by saying that Sean, so we had a sprint, as everybody probably knows, in Barcelona last week, and that went very, very well. We spent a lot of time not only designing how we want the media library to look when it's stable, but also Sean went and implemented a proof of concept that gets us a lot of the way there. So at this point, we've been sort of looking at the roadmap and, taking into account, creating a few new issues of, encapsulating what it would take to get the new media library designs into core, and how those kind of relate to our stabilization roadmap in terms of, what we really, really need, what are stable blockers, what are less stable blockers, and what are just nice to haves. So Sean and I had a call earlier where we talked a little bit about that, and we're still, I think we're still adjusting the roadmap issue itself, but we have Sean, is that doc, that Google Doc, is that open for everybody to look at if they're curious? Oh, this is probably more product manager stuff.
Yeah, I can open it.
Yeah, I just sent it to everybody too. And yeah, so we have some we're still sort of fleshing out our absolute roadmap here. But meanwhile, we do have a proof of concept that we have designs we can talk about. So Sean, do you want to demo the POC? And then, so the way we thought we would do this is Sean would demo the POC first, and then we would look more at the designs, which are somewhat more expansive, and discuss those. Sound good to everybody?
Just a bit of administrativia. The issue number for the roadmap is 2834729.
That's correct.
Cool.
I posted a link in the group chat of the Hangout.
No, thank you.
And a specific one to a comment, which we will probably talk about more after I do the demo, I guess, because there were some assumptions made while doing the design, but maybe it's nice to first show what we have, I guess. Is everybody okay with that?
I'm certainly okay with it.
Okay, let me check if I can share my screen. Okay, is everybody seeing my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, so what we have here is media field with the media library widget in it, which has the add media button. And the reason we have the add media button is because we want to have a clear separation between the widget and the media library itself, where all the interaction in the widget should refer to the references between the content and media. And when you open up the media library, you should get to the place where media lives, actually. And if you interact with the media library, you are adding media to the system and interacting with the canonical media entities. I hope that is clear. So what we implemented were these vertical tabs where you can browse to the media by type. And we added a field to directly add media of that type to the top of the media selection, where you can just browse your local files. This whole area should be clickable, and where you can also drag and drop some files into it. Let's see if this works. Where you can then provide the required fields for this. Currently, we have just a basic installation, so there are no extra fields, but this is basically just a form mode where you can add more fields if you want or need to. When you save this, you go back to the media library to show the user that these are now actually added to the media library, where everyone else in the system with permissions can use this. And the files you added or the media you added are automatically selected. And it also, yeah, well, if you have a cardinality for the field set, it also makes sure you can't select more items than you should. So let me just select. So this is now added to your widget. And if I remove something here, this will only remove the reference to the content. So this will not remove your actual media item. And also when you open it, you don't see the select button. Only when you actually select something, you get the buttons to do that. It shows how many items you have selected. And let's see. So let me just add a new one here. So I have 2 items selected right now. Can add a new one. This will probably take me over the limit. And I can add these as well now. So yeah, I guess currently that's what we have so far. To me, it feels like a pretty big leap forward from what we have in core already. And I guess this is, I don't know, something we can start discussing now as a starting point, I guess. Maybe we should move forward to the assumptions we made and then to the design. Adam, is that a good idea?
We got a little side railed in the chat.
Yeah.
Baby sorry, I was not looking at it.
Shark is terrible. We should honestly build in code that prevents you from adding Baby Shark to the media library.
Yeah, that's my favorite video.
It's not quite a stable blocker, but it almost is.
So I had a couple questions real quick before we move to the next thing. So all of what you showed is working code?
Yes.
Well, fuck, that's great. What is the delta to getting this like core worthy? I guess you have to write tests and you have to check it for accessibility and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, the accessibility is something I already kept in mind while doing this. So everything should also work with just your keyboard, which is not not all we need to care about, but it's at least a very big leap in the right direction. And I guess to get this actually added to core, we should probably split all the code we wrote up into separate reviewable issues, which I already sent you a proposal of, I guess, on how we should be going to do that. And yeah, besides that, we should write a lot of tests, I guess.
And without JavaScript too?
We talked about what we should do when there's no JavaScript, but this media library stuff is pretty heavily leaning on all the JavaScript. Yeah. So maybe it would be best to mark the media library widget, because it's just a widget basically, as JavaScript only, and provide a simpler widget which we would enhance with JavaScript.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one thought that I had is currently what we might want to what we may want to fall back to is a standard entity reference field with like the text field, which is progressively enhanced with JavaScript. I mean, without JavaScript, you have to know what the syntax is for that type of field. So quite frankly, entity references usability is pretty shitty without JavaScript anyway. But I think personally, I think that falling back to
a fallback that would solve the main issue, which is making sure that it's still usable without JavaScript.
That's what I'm thinking.
At some point in the far future, after this is stable and available to everyone, it would be neat if there was some approximation of a media library that non-JavaScript users got, but I can't really get fussed about that when like 97% or something of users are using JavaScript. It's going to affect a small portion of people, and those people can probably use the existing entity field or entity reference widget.
That's what me and Adam discussed earlier tonight. And yeah, for the future, we could maybe create a simpler version of this in the widget, but I'm not really sure if that's a stable blocker or an immediate priority right now.
I don't think it's a stable blocker, because if you think about it, we've shipped the media functionality with the existing, no offense to everyone who worked on it, but subpar, shall we say, is the nicest word I can think of to say. You know what I mean? Because we don't have the media library right now as stable in core. So the if you enable media module right now, you get that UI that's like basically entity reference. So in other words, it wouldn't represent a regression in functionality for anyone. This would instead become an enhancement that's available if you use JavaScript. So my gut feeling, we should probably double check with the release manager, but my gut feeling is that should be fine, and it would be more like even a could have than a should have. It would be like, and maybe if someone uses links or something and they care enough about it, they'll write an accessible fallback.
So speaking of release management, what Sean just demoed to us is stuff, again, because we have working code for this, just without tests mostly. This is stuff we feel like we can land, at least mostly, I believe, for 8.7. And then what Christina has is designs of what we want to do beyond that to improve it even further. So if nobody else has any questions about that, we can move on to the designs.
Maybe we should start with the list of assumptions first, to share this with everyone, and maybe there's feedback on that already before we move on to the designs. Is that okay?
Okay. John?
I can pull up the comment so everybody can see it on my screen as well.
Actually, before we move on to that, could you say again what the different vertical tabs do? I missed something. There's only one media library, but then what do?
So the vertical tabs, well, the list of assumptions has some information about this as well, but this will split up. Sorry, the media per media type. So each media type has a specific source with its own type of input. So for example, the YouTube allows for a URL, and the images allows for file uploads. To basically make it easier for people to directly see what they can do and also to know what the field accepts, we split this up over the separate types. So if you go to YouTube, you would know there you can paste the URL, and that you need to paste only YouTube URLs here. This also makes it clear to the user that, for instance, an Instagram URL would not automatically work. And also for images, you can upload images and probably not zip files or something.
Okay, so in terms of the media library that we're viewing, that's implicitly putting a filter by type.
Correct.
Yes, and that also solves the problem of the different source inputs, because, for example, if you create a new media type that allows for an address field as a source, because you want to add geographical locations as media, for example, then that would make your whole experience a lot more difficult if you're not splitting it up by type.
And if we're looking at a field on a particular content type, then sort of this widget is aware of what media types it accepts.
Yeah, that's correct.
I can show that as well. So for this field, I only allowed media types image document in YouTube.
Right.
Something that is also implemented here, that for the media library, you can order the types. So if you want to say this field is mostly used to add YouTube videos, and image would be a secondary media type or choice for this. Then you can reorder it. Save this. And then if I would pull up the media library here, then YouTube should be the top one. So you can basically per field provide the user with the most important input field. And also, if you only have one, yes, sorry?
On the other hand, what you can't do is select 5 files, 3 of which are images and 2 of which are audio documents or something, and drag all of them in. You can only, at the moment, you can only drag, I guess you can't drag anything there now, but when the image tab is selected, you can only drag in image files. And when the document tab is selected, you can only drag in PDFs.
That's correct. And one of the reasons we decided to do this for now is because if you just show a generic upload field, you are not automatically sure what it would accept. So would it accept zip files or not? Would it accept PDFs or not? That also depends on which media types are configured for the field. And I think it would be a little bit weird if you open up the media library and you see an upload field, and for one field that's called documents, that only allows documents, you can't upload images, but for another field, you can upload only images, and it would be hard to, I don't know, make it automatically clear to the user what they can or cannot upload. So this is maybe not a perfect solution for it, but this is at least something to think about, and maybe this would be a nice bridge to go to the list of assumptions, because we also and the designs, because we also talked about having an all tab where you can just basically see all media regardless of type, which could allow for easier way to upload or add media of different types at the same time. But that's well, the design of that is a little bit trickier, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
Christina or Adam, I'm not sure if I missed anything here, or if you want to add something.
I think that I think you pretty much covered that. Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, Sean, do you want to open the list of assumptions and go over it? So I should just mention that this is what we sat down on the first day, and we were like, okay, let's try to code it. Let's make our assumptions explicit. Who and what are we actually designing for here? And this is what we decided on. So go for it.
Okay. Maybe it's better if you do it, because your English is much better than mine.
Bullshit. But anyway. So the assumptions we make. So the first thing that I should mention here is that this is a really, really hard problem space, and it's complicated. And we realized that it was impossible to do something that was going to please everybody all of the time. So what we have decided to do is optimize for some specific use cases. And for things, if people need things that are more advanced, they can go to Contrib and use Entity Browser or whatever other interesting Contrib solutions show up. So with that in mind, what we are optimizing for is the add case. We figure that a lot of the time, most of the time, although people do want to reuse media as well, mostly what they want to be able to do is just open the media and add some stuff to it. So we're going to optimize for that. We're going to optimize for adding and support reuse, which a couple of comments down below the one you're seeing was like, does that mean reusing media is a second-class citizen? It does not mean that reuse is a second-class citizen. It's just that we think that most people are going to want to open the media library and add stuff to it. So that's one assumption we're making. We're also assuming the media library is not going to contain tens of thousands of media items with a ton of complex metadata. That's a very complicated thing that we're not really going to design for. If people need that, there are DAMs that probably do a better job for media library growth. We also make the assumption that people when they open the media library with intent to add things to it, they know what they're trying to add. They know if they're trying to add a YouTube video or if they're trying to add images or documents or what. So although we want to make the process of adding as convenient as we can for users, we assume that they know what they're trying to add. They know that a PDF is not an image, for example. We also assume that most sites are built relatively sensibly, in the sense that you don't need 70 different media types. That would be an abuse of the system. So most sites we assume, or we are designing for sites that are built with maybe 5 to 10 distinct media types, each of which has a specific purpose. So like image, document, audio file, YouTube, Vimeo, Flickr, Instagram. So those kinds of basic things, which is very close to what Core is supporting. We also assume that when people embed media in formatted text in CK Editor, they're going to want to add captions to it, and that they'll want to have that caption be different each time they use the media thing in some formatted text. So I could use the same image in 2 different articles, and it would have a different caption in each time. So that's a thing we're going to want to support because we assume that people will want that. We assume that people are okay working inside of a modal. We talked about this in Barcelona, and we can't make it work outside of a modal because of technical limitations in Core that we just can't do anything about in the short term. And as Sean alluded to before, we assume that in the media library, when you're working with the media library in the modal, that is the media library. That is all the media in your Drupal site. And what you're doing in the media library modal affects your absolute media library. Conversely, anything you're doing to media that has been referenced and is showing up in a field widget or in embedded text is something that only affects that particular usage. And that this is a very important boundary, since it's like, okay, I'm in my media library and now I'm not in my media library, I'm on a page that I'm working on. And that we decided is a very, very important boundary to establish. And we also finally decided that we're going to optimize for clarity instead of low click count, although we're definitely going to keep the click count as low as we can. If we can avoid adding clicks, we will. But if it's more clear to do something that involves adding a click, we're going to go with clarity and not with low click count, all other things being equal. So that's our assumptions in a nutshell. Any have at me, or have it, Sean, actually.
I just have one question, which is, how was this list of assumptions derived? Like, did you talk to users of the current media modules? Was it the developers who came up with this list? Like, who came up with this list?
Well, it was us all sitting in a room, and Christina actually made a really good point, which was that if we had the resources to do user testing, that would have been much more helpful, but we didn't have that, so we kind of had to just come up with this. And best guess essentially based on shared experience, which is why I'm not, I wouldn't say this is carved completely in stone, but it is what we agreed on.
Yeah, I didn't mean that as a criticism. I was just curious if it was like, it's helpful to know that it was people with the most knowledge of this that made up the these list of assumptions, and so right. It probably does make sense to get them vetted in some form. Because I noticed like FIP, I don't know who that is, but the next comment after this was great. Like, kind of really most of what's there, but then challenging on a couple of things. And it seems like we could maybe do with a round of just assuring that those assumptions are valid before we.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is against that, although Sean and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong there. I still have to read AP's comment because I was also like, man, that's terrific feedback. So yeah,
it was terrifically written, and it was timely because it was like right after that. I was like, oh wow, nice counterpoint. Or do that, I don't know. But yeah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it means stop the rails, whatever. But I think it is gonna help us validate the stuff. I can I don't know about user testing. Christina, do you know, would that be something like Suzanne would be willing to help with? Like either actual user testing of this or validating the direction in the same sort of survey approach she's been taking with the admin UI stuff?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm asking you to speak on behalf of someone who's not here. That's just
yeah, I know. But some people that actually showed during time on the admin UI channel actually showed interest on doing some user tests. So maybe we could try to talk with them.
I don't think it's a requirement to move forward with this, but even if we could just do a loosey-goosey, like tweet this on Twitter through the Drupal account or something and see what feedback comes up. You know, I don't know. And even that's terrible because it's all people who know to follow Drupal.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It would be, ideally, it would be like a call out like, hey, people who build sites for content authors, can you, you know, who talk to your content authors, can you validate that this makes sense? You know?
That would be great. Mainly this list came up because after several hours of discussions, we actually needed like some basic assumptions, because otherwise we were just moving forward and going back again. No, what did we said about that? And we needed some like a basic to
and props to drawing some lines in the sand too, because that, to your point, it's like you can't design when there's no constraints and no directions. So
exactly.
Yep.
Right, and it's a hard problem space. We can't implement without assumptions either. So that's kind of why we came up with it. But yeah, I definitely agree with that.
It means 30 different things too, so that's also super fun. So
one thing I think I also thought of, I guess, after reading that comment of PP is we are missing a remark about how well trained the users are, because there are specific sites that have more complex media wishes, I guess, and some of them will have trained users, which would they would have special requirements, like, for example, they know media are going to live in the media library and that this is all canonical, so redirecting back to the media library after you add something is something not everybody would want if they know how this all works. So I guess having some constraint about we are designing for immediately trained users, or well-trained or untrained users, I guess that's something we should probably add in here to make it easier to, I don't know, explain why we made certain choices.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think you definitely want to aim for as untrained as possible.
Yeah, I want to second that. Like, I think when you look, the demo's great. Like, I know from a technical point, all the functionality you have is really great. Like, the flow, what you're doing, getting everything done. But when you look at the labeling and how things are working, it really should be catered to the untrained user. Like, Sean, if you could pull up the demo, I'll throw out like immediate like things like go to the YouTube. It says, yeah, like if you're okay, let's go and say someone doesn't know what they're doing and they're on the YouTube. It should say paste a YouTube URL, and the placeholder text should probably be like EX with the example of a YouTube dot, the YouTube.b, whatever that pastable URL that they suggest, just to reinforce the pattern. And on the image one, I have this issue like Adam, you brought up like PDF, people think they know that they shouldn't put PDF in images, but that's not really true, because when you scan a document, it usually generates a PDF document and you're like, oh, there's an image of my whatever I want to upload. And it makes me feel like you want to emphasize like file extensions or things like what are the file extensions for images? Like, is SVG an image or is it not an image? That's a graphic. And if there's a way to get file extensions into this user UX, that could just help reinforce. You just assume people don't know what an image file extension is. And I'll even throw out there in the sidebar. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say in the sidebar, there's like real estate to add descriptions to those tabs, the vertical tabs. to include extensions or file types?
So yeah, there's a middle point between giving information and giving too much information. The more information that you give, the more difficult for the user to focus on something. So I'm not maybe the extensions are missing, but when you actually add extensions, you maybe actually want to add the maximum field size or this kind of things, and you start adding text, and if you add text to the tabs, then you end up with a lot of text, and that's usually what makes UI super busy, or I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, basically, we concluded that what's below the image field right now, that's just unhelpful, or at least too much information, I guess. So we try to trim it down. But I guess having the extension list, I think the example of is an SVG an image or not is probably a valid point. And I think there is definitely room for those small UX tweaks, I guess.
But another way to handle that without cluttering the text is just to filter the selector. You know what I mean? Like when your browse window opens, it only lets you select pings, for example. That's how it's usually done, unlike Facebook or whatever. It's just like I can't select a .patch file if it's an image.
Yeah, but when you are dragging something inside, you can actually have picked anything.
Yeah, I guess I don't know enough about the JavaScript limitations, like library limitations, but I swear, I'll try this now, but I swear I can't just drop a PDF into a Facebook image. Like, I don't think it's going to work. So somehow it's
no,
it's type specific, but
you can validate that on drag, and if there are no correct file, there are no correct extensions in the entire list of selections, then you can probably not allow people to drop it. But when you have like one image and two zip files, for example, it already becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, no, I understand why you're breaking down my media type. I was talking about Jacob's specific feedback about I don't know if I can put a JPEG or not. If that would be one way to solve that without just limit the selector so it will not let you select an SVG, and then you figure it out from there.
Fair enough. Yes, sure. Is this maybe a good point to take a look at the designs?
One more question.
Yeah, sure.
So Adam was talking about how things that happen inside the modal affect the media library. What sorts of changes can you make in there other than adding new ones?
At the moment, none. But we talked about when you select something, besides the select media, which we probably think should be named add to page or something like that. There should be a button besides it that says edit, and probably also a delete button next to it, right here. So if you click the edit button, you can edit the selected media items, and or delete them. But if you delete them, you delete them from the entire library, which it should probably have a confirm form that specifically mentions that you will remove this for everybody that has used this media item or that wants to use it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think there's this design issue with a link to the designs Christina made. Christina, do you want to talk about this a bit?
Your English is better.
Okay, I'll try. So, like a lot of things that we design. Oh, I'm not sure how well this.
And for the recording, the issue number is 3019150.
Oh yes. Let let me see. 3019150. Yes, on my screen share, of course, is maybe not showing to everybody. But so we have the widget here. This is where you start the first screen. We also try to show the flow a bit. So from the widget, which has the Add Media button, you can let's see. Okay, you can go to the empty media library, which is still something we need to do, or you can go to a media library that has files in it, and there are different versions of it. So if you have only one media type, it doesn't show the vertical tabs, and you probably want the filters to be collapsed to save some precious screen real estate, and the add form above it. And please, Christina, if I say something that is just not true, correct me.
Okay.
Where you have the buttons to switch between the table view and the grid view, which is an accessibility thing, but also for documents, showing this as a table is probably more helpful than showing this as a grid. What we have here, there are different versions of how to maybe combine the upload with the URL.
Yeah,
upload
so
is for the alt tab. Yep, Christina.
exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, here we had this last discussion about having or not this alt tab that actually can have a draggable region, because we discussed if we could if it couldn't be checked if the type of media, and also if we add here a drag and drop and also we let people paste URLs, then at some point we will have the problem that someone will want to have here, for example, the allocation, for example, which have much more fields. So this will be like an option with the capacity to drag and drop and to paste a quick URL for remote videos or something like that, combine it. And then the other one, the old tab, don't have that, basically, where you actually have an add media button and drop down actually, and from there you pick the media that you want to add. There are two versions.
Yes, so that's the bottom version where you disambiguate the media type through a drop button, for example. And only after you selected a type, we can show you the correct form. Because especially if you have multiple media types that have different input, for example, if you add an address field based media type here, then that would mean you would have to browse local files, paste the URL, or enter an address, which could become very complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is something to think about, I guess. Let's see, what do we have here? So this one shows the media library with just a single add field. That's also something we thought about, to just show the add field for only the most important media type at the beginning, but still allow you to browse all media. So you see the all tab where you can have the videos, documents, and images like all together, but you are only allowed to add images here because that's the most important media type for this widget. And this shows you what you see when you change it to a separate tab. Basically, this is relatively close to what I demoed before. Let's see. Oh yeah, and the reuse. So how you select something And if you select, you also have the edit or delete with delete confirm form, which we should probably add a message to that if you delete it here, you delete it everywhere in your site.
Yeah, well, it has to be
Put a
worked.
pin in that because I'd be curious what happens if that happens. But let's not interrupt your demo for that.
I think if you delete, yeah, it's basically an entity reference field. So you would just, it's basically the same if you would have an article referenced in multiple places and you delete the article. So I think the edit screen is also still a work in progress, but for the user flow, we know that this is something we should fix. And I think somewhere in this document there is a proposal on how to do that as well. Let me see. This is also still to do. So this is for the drag and drop. This is also already demoed, and we have a working version of that. After you drag and drop. Yes, sorry? Yeah.
Here I made some changes from the previous version that we saw. So here we have several options in this workflow. One will be once you drag and drop something, you can actually see the list of the elements you actually dragged in. What happens here is that at some point, sometimes probably, for example, when you drag and drop images, you're going to need to add the alternative text. So you're going to have to fill some forms. So there are two options here. One is if right after dragging something into the model, you directly jump into the first form to add this alt text, for example, or if you first jump into a list with all the elements that still need some elements, some info.
Yeah, that's actually something we discussed as well. So if you have 6 uploaded files and only 3 of them have required fields, it's kind of hard to get an overview of what is complete and what isn't. So we thought about showing this list to at least confirm that you have added these files to the library and that some have missing information. This same design could probably also be used when you click the edit button and you have some selected media on several types. We can also show you this list to see this is your selection, and also probably we can use that for the, I'm not sure where it is, but we have one of the designs where in the bottom right corner there's a counter of 5 items selected or something, and when you click that, we should also show you a list of everything you selected. So we can show this we can use this pattern for the edit after you upload it and for showing the selection, and then it would also allow you to interact with the selection, so editing it or adding required fields and some stuff like that. And I think there is also well, there are several ways to do this, but
yeah,
at least this should give an indication of how that could look.
Yeah, so there are 2 options. One is actually editing. So one option is what there is right now, that you have a super long form with all the items there that actually need some fields to be filled. So you will be on the same page without, page in the model without actually going forward or going back. So that will be one option. So you are just editing things inside the same table. But the other option is actually having these steps where you actually start having some errors, and so yeah.
I'm trying to find which one that is.
The first with wizard. Progress, yeah.
So that's maybe this one.
Yeah, so let me jump into Figma. Where are you? So no, not this one, this one. This one is the, yeah, this one is the first. We should decide if we actually first come into this page to see what's needed, or we directly go to fill the first item that needs information. And then here we will have the counter with all the items, or maybe we can actually make all the steps here. And when you actually have everything filled, then you go to the other, the next one on the right, to this other view.
This is starting to look a lot like the first version of this looked, and we kind of rejected it because it was so much. Like, you will have clicked at least 12 times before you've even saved any. You haven't even gotten to the point of adding your media yet. Because you're still in this interstitial of adding things. So the current form where it displays all of the media you just uploaded with the alt text exposed, you're right, it's a trade-off, right? It's like if you uploaded 47 things and you filled out half of them and then your browser crashes, you're fucked, you know? But most, you'll probably do that once and then never do that again. And then from that on, you're going to upload 5 things at once and do them pretty quickly. But
yeah, that's, sorry.
Yeah, I just worry that this is heading down the road of you're in your modal window for 25 minutes before you actually see the result of your work.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about that.
I guess if you upload 47 images and you need to provide 47 alt texts, that is just a complex situation.
No, I mean, I do it in Facebook all the time, right? Like I upload a whole swatch of photos off my camera, and it shows me them all uploading as they're going, and I just fill out the things while it's uploading the one. You know what I mean? Like it's a very chill process. But I just click once, and it does everything in the background. You know, like the equivalent would be showing the current thumbnail view with the alt text exposed, and then the things filter in as they're uploading, like so the list gets longer. But yeah, I don't know about this direction, but I don't know. I'm also only one person, so I'm.
So here the question is, actually when you've filled everything and you don't have any more information to fill, should we actually move people into this page, or should we actually close the model and actually show everything into the node edit form?
I think ideally it'd be drag a bunch of stuff, whoop, the screen with the preview and the alt text exposed, typey, and then at some point I, as the user, click, yes, I'm done with that. Because you don't know, they might go back and forth a couple times and adjust the alt text to something. And then once they click save, then I think I would jump them back to the node form, because that's where they started from. And then it would show.
Actually, they started from the media library.
Yeah.
Say that again.
When you start adding, you are in the media library. So after you save the required fields, you should also probably go back to the media library.
No, the reason I was in the media library is because I was in the node form. That's where I started.
So the thing is that, for example, you start filling 20 alt text from images, and once you are on the last one, what should happen there? Should we actually add this add to article primary button, or should we let them have a preview of all the 20 images that they have uploaded to be sure that they are uploading whatever is
I think
necessary?
just add article, because in the current one, like what Sean just showed, you can see a thumbnail already to know if it uploaded or not. So I think just add the article. Yeah.
So if you compare this to what I just demoed, this basically just shows a little bit more compressed version of it. So we are hiding the required fields after, behind a click, I guess.
Right, which I don't like because because they're required fields. This forces me to have to click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in order to actually proceed to the primary button. Right.
So if you go up, there's yeah, exactly.
So here you show only the required fields if they are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work, except we lose the definition of the thumbnail that way. Like right now, the thumbnail is big enough that I can get an idea that, yeah, that's the picture of the otter that I uploaded or whatever, you know. But if it's that tiny, I have no idea if that's the right picture or not.
Yeah, especially if they're from an event where all pictures kind of look the same.
Right. If it's like all my Christmas lights pictures, I might need a bigger view of that then.
Okay, so we could.
So I understand the desire to compress this size down, but I guess, and I totally get the use case where we're gonna have things without required text sometimes, or required fields. But I guess I wouldn't sacrifice. What I like about the current UX is that it's the least amount of annoying, busy work possible to get you to where you need to go, and that the thumbnails are much better. So yeah, even like that would be fine, except then it's gonna look goofy with the with the other ones. Yeah. Anyway, just that's my 2 cents though. But I feel like I'm dominating this conversation. I'm really.
I'll weigh in a little bit on this screen. Is like, it would be nice if there was a show all where you could just where it would open all the required fields at once, and then you would be literally tabbing through and just entering text. Because right now this UX is click on the gear, open, save. There should be almost like a show all link at the top, or like we could do it all at once, where you're just tabbing through all the alt text.
Well, right now is what we have, right? So I think it's right now something like that, right? You actually have everything on the same page. When
should I show it again?
Yeah.
So if you go to the images, let me just select some. You get this, or we could maybe save a little bit of room.
Yeah, it's you could make the thumbnails a little bit smaller and compress it, but yeah, I completely get what you mean, because yours looks a lot nicer than this. Like this looks really busy and clunky, but
this one, but so the design looks better, I guess.
Yeah, the design one definitely looks better, but I feel like this is more practical. I don't know.
Okay.
It's very quick to enter all those alt texts. It's like, I mean, the more you could show on screen, the quicker it is. But
I tend to agree.
Yeah. Yeah, we weren't sure about what was the best option.
Yeah, if this is nice because you only have one required field. So if you start adding, for example, a tags field to your media and a checkbox to allow it to be private or something, that would clutter the interface a bit. But maybe the collapse idea, where you could make it collapse more easily, or maybe show it collapsed by default and allow to expand, then at least at the beginning you get an overview of what you just uploaded. For example, if there are 20 images, it's easier with this small design to show that everything got added. And once you click something like expand, or I don't know, terminology is not my greatest thing, I guess, but allow for all the forms to be shown with the click of a button, then that would already help, maybe.
I have a minor question or two. I'm wondering if it would be possible to allow the adding of the media and just not using it until required fields are filled out. Because there might be instances where someone's adding in a whole bunch of stuff through the media library window, and I don't know as a user if they would automatically assume that they're limited to what they can add in via this interface. And but not saving anything. I'm thinking back on Angie's description of using Facebook and some of the other media like ad situations I've seen, and they tend to all add the physical items as they come up, and then you add the metadata afterwards. There's not a lot of interfaces I've seen where the users have to enter in a whole bulk amount of additional metadata before they can see it and manipulate it from the library perspective. But I can understand limiting its use if you have a required field.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't get away from that because Drupal does require. I guess if people turned off the alt text on images and there were no required fields, we could skip this entire step entirely. But unfortunately, default configuration of core is that that field is required, and therefore every image you upload does need an alt text filled out.
Yeah, and we do want it. I mean, you want good accessibility. I'm just trying to think of because I agree that the number of clicks is probably going to cause complaint. The users that I've dealt with complain about that kind of thing. And if it's not optional, if we can't make it simple, then they tend to just not do it.
Yeah. Well, this way we're forcing them because they can't add their images until they fucking fill the fields out. I think what you're saying is you'd have them see the images appear in the list. So they were like, yay, done. But then the button to actually add it to the article is grayed out until they go back and edit them and add the text in. But I think that's also confusing.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a perfect solution. I'm just thinking that, and it probably is just the constraint of wanting accessibility. I suspect that Facebook doesn't care much about accessibility in that instance when they're adding those images because they do a lot of questionable things.
Well, no, like Facebook images have a caption. It's optional, but the field is there. Yeah. But they don't have the problem of some arbitrary amount of metadata might be here. That's so they know that there's a location field, a tag field, and a comment field, or whatever it is, caption. But they can design the interface with that expectation versus we have to design a container for arbitrary numbers, including 0 of required fields here.
A lot of it goes back to one of the original statements in I guess it was the goals or aims about doing as many clicks as it takes. And I get so much pushback from users who just opt not to contribute content because of the numbers of clicks or the complexity of the interfaces. And so I don't know if there's a way to split the difference and keep things streamlined, because this does seem like you're sending people through a lot. And if they go through this process and there's problems and they've lost everything that they've done, so they've added 20 images and they go and they add all this alt text and they click save and it fails, you are going to make a lot of very angry users.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I really do agree with tracking the number of clicks. Like, we need to get the workflow working, but tracking the number of clicks and seeing if there's ways to optimize it. I mean, going back to even the add media, if there was a drop down that said add image and that jumped the modal dialog to the upload image, or we phrased it properly, like upload new image, and this drop down on the node edit form, jump the modal 2 clicks into this process, we're reducing the number of clicks down to 3 instead of like 5, which, people lose patience after 3 clicks.
I like that.
I'm not following you. So you are suggesting that after the drag and drop, so you can actually drag and drop something into the media field?
No, okay, you have a button that opens this dialog with a horizontal, the vertical tabs with like 10 options. If there was if you go back to that node edit form, if there was a drop down that was like, because we have space here, if there was a drop down that said like upload new files, and that, if we figured out how to be like, okay, browse your media, and then there's a drop down, add new media, add new image, add YouTube video, and we could jump them into the modal, we could skip a lot of steps. Because we're agreeing that most people want to just add new things.
We discussed that.
Yeah,
but there were problems.
Pattern does not work very well from what I've scene.
What, the drop downs or?
Drop downs would be okay, I guess. I thought you were saying a drop button where it's like
a drop button. It's some way where you reduce the number of clicks, so someone just opens a button and it jumps them to that task.
yeah.
Well,
Because we got 2 or 3 clicks to get to uploading an image, right?
So-
Christina, you were saying you talked about that?
Yeah, so our first idea was trying to have this first region that we're seeing actually a drag and drop region. But the problem is we can't actually do some stuff here because we don't have inline forms. So if you are here and you drag and drop something here and suddenly something's push up, just that a model appears, it's kind of you're changing the context. So if we have to do everything on the model, ideally we should start on the model, because otherwise we are changing, we are not using the same patterns every time. Because imagine that you have a YouTube field here, then it wouldn't be the same pattern. Or you have, for example, a YouTube video file and images also. So you can actually have data that is a link and data that you can actually drag and drop. So it's not just a drag and drop region, it's also a region with a field. And when you add the field, so at the end, we decided that everything needs to happen on the model instead of here, because at some point you will have to force the model. So let's just start on the model, because there were technical things related to that, right?
But what's something that could be done, and if I understand you correctly, if you make this thing a drop button, that if you don't drop down and you click it, you just open the modal. But if you click that little arrow thing and you know how that works, then you could optionally select a media type directly, which would take you to a specific tab in the modal directly. And then you skip the step where you have to select a tab in the modal. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, the other question I throw out there with the modal is, how'd you put it? When someone's adding media, there's like a pattern. They're adding images to the site. I'm just throwing it out there. Like, do we remember which tab they're in, or we're always defaulting them to all? So that's another approach.
It depends on the selection.
No, we remember which tab you're in. So.
Oh, you do?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if I would be adding media here, then I switch to image, and I drop an image in, and I save it. I would go back to the image tab.
But then if you close this and click browse media again, you start over from YouTube. It goes to the top.
Oh, okay, like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about a site builder setting for that, where you could specify the default tab that you wanted to show.
That we have right here. So.
Oh, you've already? Jeez.
So
they have the default.
Yeah. So if I want to make image the default, I just save it here, and then I go back.
I think that does solve it, because most people will do image, depending on the media type field. Yeah.
I mean, it really depends on the site, right?
And then you open with the image tab first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can set it per field.
Offhanded comment on some call, and then like 5 minutes later there's code to do. I'm sure it wasn't 5 minutes later, but wow, that's great.
And you can actually drag and drop directly here.
Yes.
So I have a really potentially stupid question, so I apologize. I'm curious what the technical blocker is on being able to auto detect the file, so that on the add media, if you had a Dropbox, why do we need a drop-down list? Why couldn't we just see they're dropping down JPEGs and you have an instruction, drop only the same file type? But if they dropped 5 images and they were all JPEGs, you would go to the image tab automatically. Then you don't have to choose anything. You're making it very simple, and people are just dropping their media and being taken to the appropriate tab.
Well, we talked about this, and after playing around with other systems where they allow that, I ran into it a couple of times that sometimes it didn't accept some of my files for no apparent reason, so it seemed. And especially with the URL field. So here you specifically choose YouTube and enter a URL, but in other systems, they just showed me a URL field and then I pasted an Instagram link, and it didn't work because it only accepted YouTube. So having the disambiguation also means it depends on a lot of settings. So how is your field configured? Which media types are allowed? Which are the extensions for your media types? And it becomes really unclear really fast on what you are allowed to enter in a specific field and what you are not allowed to do. So that's a UX problem.
Yeah, the underlying problems there are not so much technical as are UX. And we definitely went over this a whole lot in Barcelona, and this is why we're kind of coming back to this. But yeah, like from a technical perspective, it's not particularly difficult. But yeah.
And one thing that also could happen if you have 2 different image media types. So you have an image and you have, for example, header images. If you then upload a JPEG, you then also need to choose which media type did you actually mean, which is also a step we avoid by choosing the media type first.
Yeah, there's actually one of the designs that has that. So it's just another step, and after that, then maybe the header image doesn't have the alt text mandatory, or for example, it has more text mandatory. So it will depend. The form that you get after that will depend on the type that you choose.
Which would also be a little bit weird if you upload 2 images, and one would be a header image and one would be a normal image. And the header image has totally different fields than normal image, which could also be confusing. So choosing a type first really solves a lot of problems. It may also be a barrier for some specific cases where you really want to upload 3 JPEGs and a PDF. But if we have to choose, then we tended to lean towards disambiguation by the user first. And yeah, but I guess that's debatable.
Yeah, it needs some discussion. That's why there are several designs for that.
Yeah, I see. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I feel like in Contrib someone might solve that problem of creating that like generic file upload, module to allow you to drag and drop files, and it figures out media types. Because I mean, you do have weighting here. So the example would be if you had 2 image media types, since you have these media types weighted, the logic would be the higher ranking media to the first match would be the default. And but I think in Contrib someone will explore this problem. What you have here makes a lot more sense.
I'd just be interested in seeing user testing on this stuff, because I just ran into so many headaches with my own users in the past. And I lost a lot of momentum on my project as a result of the complex ways that we solve some of these problems. So that's why I tend to hyper focus on simplicity and natural behaviors, because a lot of users that I've run into don't necessarily differentiate between YouTube and a video file, even though we know technically that they're coming from 2 different places. One is a URL, one would be a local file, for instance. But I've seen a lot of instances where they treat both as a video, and so they'll click on the video space and they'll expect to be able to upload a YouTube video there. So the disambiguation. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's why user tests are important. It's just us, designers and developers, making assumptions. And assumptions sometimes are good, sometimes are not. So
I think regardless, though, I really appreciate Thomas's feedback, because I know you have a lot of experience working with people. And I think regardless, though, the idea of an add any magical thing and it auto-magically figures everything out for you thing I would say is totally fine as a phase 2 type of situation, because currently you don't have that. Currently you have an image field or a file field, and you already have to make a decision on what you're uploading before you do it. So I don't think we're hurting anything too badly with this interface, and it seems to cut a lot of the risk of implementation by doing it this way, is how it's been explained to me.
Yeah, I'm not describing any major blockers. I'm just trying to explore, but I agree. Go with what works and what we can get out, and we can iterate. I'm assuming that if someone wanted to do a drop-in replacement for the image tab or the YouTube tab, that would be something Contrib could do. So like if you wanted like super image as a module and it was able to do something more whiz-bang than what we have, the way this is being implemented in core would be you could componentize it from Contrib and replace it one by one. Would that be a very difficult thing to do?
We have a couple of sections here. So we have this selection area that's below the line right here. Then we have the source field area that's above here. So the source field area is basically just a form we customly made. And the selection area is just a view with a form also around it. So you can alter both of the forms. And I think we should probably also make it swappable. So if you overwrite this media library controller, I'm sorry if I get a little bit too technical, but you could swap out this form for your own custom form. And you can also alter the form that's around the selection. And I think you can also replace the menu. So I already thought about if you replace this menu with a taxonomy tree, you could probably make it so the media could get tagged with one of these taxonomy terms or more, and you can navigate through a tree instead of just your media type. So this opens the door for lots of possibilities.
Perfect.
So I guess
I want to be sensitive to the fact that there's a bunch of North Americans keeping the Europeans awake very late at night.
Yeah, I was also saying like maybe we should try to work a bit to the end. I think we showed most of the designs here. Here are some things about how the widget should look after you selected stuff, because here you should probably be able to change the alt text per instance. So if you do that inside the widget, you only change the specific usage of the media in this content, and also remove it here. So this would not change the canonical thing. But I think, Christina, you're still exploring that. And also the other thing that we probably should finish is this step of editing. But I think we have some good points for us to work further on, I guess. Christina, do you have any other things you want to know to be able to continue with the design?
Yeah, just one small thing. If you can show any of the models, you will see that some of them, or at least right now, the default is the white, or well, the gray, the normal button. And I'm wondering when we should actually jump into the primary button, because right now it's a normal.
Oh, so this one.
Yeah.
So here.
Exactly. So if you go down, we had the 3 buttons. Well,
this one. I think, yeah, we like this one best.
Yeah, but until we don't have the other ones, should we always keep the blue, or should that it's a primary? Or actually we should try to keep the normal one and just use the primary ones? We can actually add something.
So I'm looking up, we have some UI standards document. It's a great question, and the answer is I don't remember. So I'm trying to find the docs about that for a second. So there's this stuff underneath. The URL is long. For the recording, if you Google Drupal user interface standards, you can get there. And then underneath that is a buttons And I'm trying to figure out the primacy of the button, the number of containers on the screen. Use primarily one type of button per container. Only mix button types when you have a good reason to, such as in emphasizing an important function. Yeah, given that, I think the only reason I'd make them primary, because primary is like, bam, like really visually strong.
No.
I think, and I should read this when I'm less doped up on cold meds, but I think I would only resort to using the primary button in the event that there's 2 or more actions to take, and you're trying to guide the user to taking one of them.
Okay.
So on the case where there's only one button and it says save, I think that is fine.
Makes sense.
Like the regular gray ones, because it's not a big deal. Versus this screen that's right on the screen right now is actually a little confusing because there's 2 primary buttons and that should not be.
No.
Another reason not to use that pattern, the add new media drop down buttony pattern to this. The reason I lean against drop down buttony patterns is because for content moderation, we did that. Like we made it so that save as draft was the default, but you could click and select other ones. And then you ended up having to undo that because it confused the living hell out of everybody and no one could figure it out. And so adding that pattern again in a 80% use case, 90% use case place does make me a little bit nervous. I think it works well on admin pages and stuff like that, where it's kind of like a more sophisticated user doing that. But when it's a content author, I think it gets a little questionable. Versus the drop zone thing, I think people widely know how to use that. But then the problem is all of the things Sean pointed out about using drop zones that can take arbitrary file types and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, for me, this is what I would do as phase 1 anyway, is just all and then filters. Because I think it is very possible to, I think it was Thomas's point, that someone remembers there's a video in the media library about a bear catching a fish in a lake or something, but they don't remember if it was a YouTube video or a local video or whatever. They just want to find the bear eating the fish video. So the ability to switch across all media, I think, is really useful. The ability to upload any arbitrary like ping and PDF at the same time, I think is, I mean, it sounds like, like Thomas has laid out some good reasons why that is actually important for us to resolve sooner than later, but I would not block the release of this functionality to 100% of Drupal users on it. And there's been talk that we could do that and contrib perhaps as a stepping stone.
That's right.
But anyway, the screen looks fine now. But...
Okay. So no more questions for me.
I just want to thank all of you, but both of you in particular, and Gabor, for staying on so long. I know this is way over what we usually do for UX meeting, but I feel like we really dug in here and got some good stuff. So what, I guess, what did you guys need from this call, and can we give it to you before we sign off? Like, I feel like one of the things you kind of wanted from this call was like a directional thumbs up that, yeah, overall this looks good. And I think I certainly would be comfortable saying that. Like, I feel like most of what we spent time talking about is kind of like little corners here and there, but I don't know. What do others think?
I mean, that's certainly what I was hoping to hear. But I'm always looking for the green light.
Yeah.
I guess on the design.
Yeah, I think this, I'll weigh in and say, yeah, I think like everything we talked about just hints at the edit workflow is the only real challenge that might need to be sorted out through some user testing. But this idea of the alt tab, the filter, the side tabs, the browsing, the upload, that all makes complete sense and seems like that's the approach that's going to work. And then when you get into editing, that just has to be sorted out with some more testing.
I guess on a design perspective, ideally finding the right workflow or the right path to avoid designing several screens just in case we finally design some things or another ones will be great at some point.
Yeah, I also want to be sensitive to your time because it's not like, you know, you're also running a friggin' redesign the admin UI initiative over there. So, you know, it was awesome of you to help out for a week in Barcelona. I want to make this permanently your baby to babysit, you know, when you got other stuff. So.
Yeah, probably, and also for them because at least if you know where you're going, probably on a technical perspective, you can just decide doing some things before actually implementing the theming or something like that.
Maybe what I can do is I will ask Dennis, who's also working with Christina on the admin UI stuff a bit, if he has time to help out finalizing this. Maybe. What do you think, Christina?
Cool, super cool. That will be great.
Okay, so I'll see him tomorrow, and I'll try to ask if he has some time. And
that'd be great too, because then we get a second designer eye looking at the. Not that it's needed, Christina. That's not what I mean. But I just, you know, with code anyway, the more eyes are always better because they spot things that you don't necessarily.
Yeah, and with design too.
Okay, cool.
And that's great.
Okay, so then we should probably clean up all the screens that we do not need, and make a list of the things that we should be designing, because some of these things we can just figure out, I guess, like the confirmation screen when you delete something is probably not something we should specifically design, or maybe we should. I'm not sure. Christina, would you be able to clean this up?
Sure, I can do that.
Then from there, we just need to make a list of the gaps we have and figure out who has time to finish this.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, and hopefully we'll. Well, I think we now know enough to comfortably start working on implementing these things already. And just hold
because
off.
I didn't want you held up on, like, there's some open questions here, but I don't feel like any of them are like, well, throw all that all over and start over. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like, let's think about that more, maybe.
No, yeah, if we get like sign off on the overall direction, and I guess also probably we need to agree on the assumptions we made and make sure there's nothing in that list of assumptions that is gonna throw away the approach, I guess. That's good enough for me to at least start creating issues and start finalizing the roadmap. And then in the meantime, in parallel, we can just finish the designs.
Yeah, sounds good. The next, I mean, we're heading right into the holiday season, and so it's going to be tricky to get much validation or anything done in the next like 3 weeks because people like spending time with their families or whatever. But anyway, yeah, we could see what we could do. Even I'll put some thought into that, and maybe even just sending a tweet out that just has like the assumptions in a document or something, like on its own, and just send that out and be like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, like that might be enough to at least, you know, make sure we're not going horribly off the rails. So I'll think
sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, rad. Well, let's give everyone negative 28 minutes of their life back.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That was great. Honestly, that was super. And fucking great work at the sprint. I can't believe how far you guys got on this. Not only from the design perspective, which I know was the primary thing, but then you also coded something that actually works. And then I don't even know what happened on the CK editor side of things, but I know there was a whole front going on there.
We coded something that actually works.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well done. So,
yeah, that's the magic of sprinting.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Acquia and Thunder.
Yeah. Exactly. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks to you guys. That was great. And yeah, we'll see you again on a future meeting, perhaps.
For sure.
All right. If we didn't scare you off too
You have not seen the last.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye, all.